team. Appreciate everyone being here this morning. If you have any questions as the panel goes on, please feel free to put them on the chat on the side. I'll be trying to moderate the chat as Brian moderates the conversation. So at a high level, this is the Fundraising in Texas panel. We're excited to have a mixture of both entrepreneurs as well as funders being able to give to the experience about what it looks like to fundraise in Texas, certainly in this time, but I think even beyond that. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Brian.
Thanks, Eduardo. It's really great to be here. It's so great to be here with all my friends this morning as well. Looking forward to enjoying a really great conversation around the state of fundraising in Texas. By way of quick introduction, my name is Brian Chambers. I'm our Vice President of Accelerator and Investment Fund at Capital Factory. We are a center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas with offices and boots on the ground in Dallas, Austin, and Houston, Texas. And since 2010, Capital Factory has been known as the most active early stage investor in the state of Texas. With that, I'm really excited to introduce you to several of the folks I've got to work with over the years. Cindy Revolt, principal at ProJane, Mike Markantonio, principal at Live Oak, Laura Baldwin, managing director at Golden Seeds, Dave Cherry, founder and CEO of Arcade, and Mauricio Delgado, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Nada. With that being said, if you would each quickly introduce your firm and maybe share also for the investors, maybe an investment that you've also made in the Texas area in the last couple of weeks or couple of months or perhaps the last year. Let's go ahead and start with Cindy.
Sure. Hi, Cindy Revolt from ProJane. We are an early stage venture firm based here in Dallas. We invest solely on behalf of Ross Perot Jr. and Anurag Jain. And our focus is seed stage B2B startups, not necessarily only in Texas, but we love a good Texas Dallas startup. And our industry focuses tend to be industries that Ross and Anurag know well, which are mobility, real estate, healthcare, and then we love kind of technology platform plays. For example, some sort of AI solution that might be able to be applied across industry. And a recent Texas investment we made, I was just looking at my board back here, which is our entire portfolio. I think the most recent one we made in Texas is a company called Scrap It. They are a waste management kind of dual-sided marketplace. So they play in the commercial and residential real estate space, provide linking up people who kind of come and clean up the construction site, take away the dumpsters, with home builders and things like that who need those services.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cindy. And Mike, you are based in Austin, but you've been spending a whole lot of time in Dallas. Will you give a quick introduction about yourself and Live Oak?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Mike Markantonio with Live Oak Venture Partners. As Brian mentioned, we're based in Austin, but we are an early stage VC, 100% focused on Texas. So personally, I spend quite a bit of time in Dallas, making sure we look at opportunities there. We've got a growing portfolio of, 3 investments in the last year in the Dallas area and some legacy investments from a prior fund. But we're investing out of our second fund. It's a $105 million fund, basically seed and Series A oriented for our first investment. So it could be between $1 million and $4 million. We typically lead rounds, take a board seat, and then reserve capital to be there to support the businesses in future follow-on rounds. Personally, from the East Coast, spent time in venture in Virginia for about 6 years, and before that worked in private equity and investment banking. So it's been fun being in the Dallas and Austin ecosystem here. And
a recent investment you've made at Live Oak?
Yeah, so just during COVID, we invested in a company called Take Command Health, which is there in the Dallas area. Kind of a modern health insurance business focused on small and medium-sized employers. So excited to work with Jack Hooper and the team over there.
Hey, Mike, Jack is one of my very good friends from high school. So
nice. He's awesome.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Laura, managing director of Golden Seeds, tell us about your unique organization and fund.
Yeah, so Golden Seeds is a national angel network, and we invest solely in women-owned and women-led companies, which could be a female founder, co-founder, or someone in the C-suite. And again, we invest nationally. New York is our headquarters, but we've also got an active chapter here in Dallas. We invest in B2B companies, B2C software companies, healthcare, and a little bit on the consumer product side. And we're a little bit later than a true seed stage, maybe a Series A or a little bit earlier than that. In terms of recent investments here, we invested a couple of years ago in Haxiot, which some of you may be familiar with. It's an IoT platform company.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And Dave, as the founder and CEO of Arcade, why don't you give us a quick pitch on Arcade and maybe if any details you would share about perhaps your fundraising or fundraising efforts in Texas.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. It's Dave Cherry, CEO and co-founder of Arcade, and we're helping distributed teams, the managers of distributed teams, keep their employees highly engaged and performing. So we connect to their point of sale or CRM, and then we use gamification to keep them incentivized and motivated throughout the day with all the goals and tasks that they have to complete, and to help the business lift productivity. We started in San Francisco originally, and then found investment here in Dallas, Texas. And so moved out here. It was just a very central location to the rest of the US, and I felt that there's a lot of great talent here as well. So, you know, it's a very up and coming market that I'm really excited to be a part of. By way of background, so we've raised venture capital out of Dallas and Austin and the coast. You know, by way of background for me, I lived and grew up in Australia in Melbourne, and moved out here. So didn't have any networks, didn't know anybody, and have been very welcomed in by the Texas ecosystem, and very fortunate to be here. So excited.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And a proud portfolio, a proud Capital Factory portfolio, I might add. So we're one of the investors in Arcade with Dave. Mauricio, and tell us about what you're working on at Nada.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So co-founded Nada about 2 years ago to transform the broken process of buying and selling your home here in the United States. I think, as we all know, it's a very complicated, disconnected, and costly experience for most homeowners. And so we co-founded Nada on the belief that, you know, solving customer problems, you know, especially leveraging technology, you know, is one way to innovate. And we launched, like I said, over a year ago here in Dallas. We've been actively raising our seed capital round here in the last few months. We've gotten pretty good traction, and are definitely excited to be part of the Dallas ecosystem, especially having spent time in, you know, I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley, about 5 years in New York. And so really, you know, got to know, obviously, the ecosystem there, you know, around, you know, fundraising and building companies, and being able to, you know, come back to Dallas, which is where I grew up, and, you know, to witness the evolution of the industry here in Dallas, especially around prop tech, and all the, you know, the active investors, as well as the companies that have been, you know, formed and been successful here in Dallas, is definitely something that, you know, I'm a part of, and, you know, and hope to make, you know, Dallas proud here.
Awesome. Thanks, Mauricio. I think this is going to be really unique because we've got both investors and both founders who are going to weigh in on these topics. This first, and I'd like to break it up that way: investors and then founders. And to start with, really the elephant in the room, that is COVID. As we think about the state of fundraising in Texas and actually beyond Texas, it was very recently NVCA pushed some data out and put some national venture capital data out that suggested that despite what others might have thought or might have believed, the venture capital funding and activity really only decreased by about 6%. And, you know, so when I personally saw that, I thought that was a lot less of an impact than I thought COVID might occur. And even some areas like Boston are receiving more investment given its health tech and pharma focus. How do you think it's actually impacted venture investing in Texas, if at all? Let's go ahead and maybe start with Cindy. We'll go Cindy, Mike, and Laura. We'll keep the same order if that's okay. Cindy, any material differences you think? in the funding?
It was interesting. I'll just give some anecdotes since we invest nationally. But I would say I definitely noticed a slowdown in my calendar in terms of new pitches and new meetings initially. And I would say in the past couple months, it is way back and probably even way more than I would expect traditionally for kind of a July and August timeframe as well. Might have to do with the fact that people can't travel as easily, but so definitely hearing a lot more pitches, definitely being sent more deals. It's kind of as if nothing ever happened. And I think a lot of it has to do, and I did notice this with my portfolio, and I'm interested to hear what Mike and Laura think about this, is there was kind of this initial freak out of, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Where am I with cash? Let me just kind of sit back for a minute. And I think a lot of investors were doing this, is just sitting and waiting to see what happens. And then I think with the legislation and then people kind of realizing like, hey, this is changing the world in a way that I might be able to take advantage of and, access a market that I might, or a product line that I may not have previously. And so what I noticed is a lot of our companies adapted extremely well. It potentially even sped up some of their roadmaps. It really was interesting and impressive to see all these entrepreneurs take advantage of the situation and make their business better. I'll just give a little anecdote. One of our portfolio companies, Rumored, Dallas-based capital factory company, they had a offer to be acquired kind of pre-COVID. And then it fell off a little bit because of COVID. We weren't really sure. And then actually the way the company responded and the product they developed to address the issues with COVID and contactless interactions improved the value of the company, and they got a better deal and ended up getting acquired. So we had this really great exit and things ended up looking better. So I also think there were a lot of funds raised pre-COVID. So there's still a lot of cash to put to work. So I think venture investors are still looking for really great opportunities. So while I think we would expect to slow down, and it kind of makes sense initially, I think with the legislation and people feeling confident with their cash, I think we'll still see investment kind of not really dwindle much more.
That's awesome. Thanks, Cindy. Yes, we're super excited about Rumored. What an awesome story out of Dallas. Mike, how have things changed in your world at Live Oak, if at all?
Yeah, echo what Cindy said. There was certainly probably a 30 or 45 day lull there where both portfolio companies and investors were trying to figure out what was going on. There was a lot of scenario planning, runway extending, and then obviously PPP was a whole new ballgame as well. But I've been pleasantly surprised at how quickly we've kind of come out of that, and deal volume has been pretty strong this summer. Just here at Live Oak, we've made 3 investments during COVID and have a signed term sheet out for a 4th. And talking to peer funds around town and throughout the state, I think everybody's equally active and looking to make new investments. We've all figured out how to do due diligence via Zoom, so kind of have that down. From a kind of stage perspective, if I've noticed one change, it's that we're seeing more interesting seed stage opportunities. I think that's probably because those businesses, a lot of the initial capital is going towards finishing product, team building, just getting those first few customers, whereas a Series A opportunity is probably more heavily focused on revenue acceleration with the Series A capital. So we've been more active on the seed stage, still looking for Series A opportunities, but I think we'll start to see those companies pop their head up maybe in Q4 or going into Q1 now that everybody's figured out how to work in this kind of COVID environment. From a portfolio perspective, we don't have much retail and hospitality exposure. So on the enterprise software side, we saw sales pipelines slow down a bit for 30 or 60 days, but even those have started to come back and folks are figuring out how to sell in a virtual environment. So been pleasantly surprised.
That's awesome, Mike. Thanks. And Laura, how about yourself? Have you seen or noticed any particular difference with Golden Seed's investing activity?
Well, first, I realized I forgot to mention that Golden Seed's also invested in Rumored, so we're also
right.
Thrilled with that.
High five all around.
Yeah. So I echo everything that Cindy and Mike have said. Again, when this all started, we realized that a lot of our companies, we didn't know how that was going to work. A lot of them had raised funds pre-COVID. With PPP, that was a huge help. And again, some of them pivoted really well in ways that we never would have guessed. So that's all been great. What's interesting is our deal flow is even more than it was pre-COVID. And we have a monthly screening and a monthly forum, and we're actually going to have 2 in September, 2 of each instead of 1. I think what's also interesting, and then the companies that we're seeing are all very strong. It's not just a matter of companies coming in and just needing money and just being desperate. I mean, they're really strong companies at a really good point. The other thing that's interesting is we weren't sure how our members were going to react, and we've actually seen a lot of demand from our members who are still willing to invest and still looking at these strong companies. So there's been a lot of demand there, which I think has been interesting.
That's awesome, Laura. And just to go a little bit one layer deeper, your fund is very unique because it's explicitly focused on diversity investing,
Yes.
investing in women-owned or women co-led organizations. And so taking a step back from COVID, there's also other movements that are occurring right now to do, to make more conscious decisions to invest in underrepresented founders. Are you seeing any particular trends this year that are different relative to 2019 or 2018 and more historical activity?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I think this is similar to lots of other groups, is we're kind of going back and examining what have we learned. Let's look at the number of diverse founders that we looked at, and I think it's something where we evaluate them along the same criteria as all of our other companies. Was there something else? Let's dig a little bit deeper. And I think now we're seeing a lot of additional companies that we're very impressed with, and so that's something that we've had to do a little bit of soul searching about. Some other things that there are lots of other groups who are pursuing this. Like there's the Bumble Fund in Austin, which is about 2 years old, and they're investing solely in minority women and other underrepresented founders. And then I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Google Startup for Black Accelerators. And I know that 2 local Dallas companies, Canaries and ShareShare, are part of that program. And it's a very small number of companies. And then in Austin, there's a new angel group that's being formed called BEAM, B-E-A-M, which is part of Women at Austin. And that group is investing in solely in women. So I think we are seeing there's a lot more focus on that, a lot of other vehicles other than, say, Golden Seeds or some of these other groups. And I think that's a very positive development.
Awesome. All fantastic initiatives. Thank you. Let's hear from the founders. Dave Cherry, COVID, has it helped? Has it hurt? And how has Arcade dealt with navigating the challenges that have come at y'all at Arcade?
Yeah, well, I think it's been a bit of a double-edged sword. So for us, and I think every startup's going to be different, but for us, we had a couple of enterprise deals that we closed early this year, and then those deployments obviously got delayed, which is frustrating. But yeah, I think it was definitely an opportunity for us to really take a step back and look at the big picture and what does it all look like. And we had our VCs calling us and making sure we had a couple of years in the bank and cash. And I just said to the team, look, our goal is to win Q2. We're not gonna, we'll be cautious. Obviously, we're not going to be frivolous, but we do want to. We're in this to win it, and I think with every crisis comes great opportunity, and so that's the approach we took. And so we adjusted our marketing, we adjusted some of our pricing, we adjusted some of our outreach. But ultimately, I think we did a great job. We ended up actually almost tripling in customers over this period. And I think for us especially, we could have been seen either as a nice to have or a need to have, right? Because what we do is obviously align with employee motivation and engagement, and we work with a lot of distributed teams, and some of a big customer concentration is in retail. And so instead of, being sorrowful and kind of hiding in the corner and saying, oh, well, we're only applicable when they have employees in the stores and all the stores are closed, we're like, well, we're perfect for any team that's now distributed. And so we took the approach of, wow, we're a must-have, we're a need-to-have for pretty much every business in the world. Our market opportunity increased. So that was the approach we took. We did close some capital during COVID as well, and so we've been very fortunate. And I think that that's obviously because we've been able to show strong customer growth. But yeah, again, double-edged sword. We could have realized some more revenue a little bit sooner with those bigger deployments, but fortunately, they've all come back online as well. So yeah, from our side, it certainly worked out pretty well.
Thanks, that's fantastic. And Mauricio, you have been operating in quite a bit of stealth mode, and then recently launched your business and are dealing with COVID in the face of really launching your business and going to market in a pretty meaningful way. How have y'all dealt with it at Nada? Has it been helpful? Has it really hurt? Has it changed your plans? What's it been like navigating COVID for Nada?
Yeah, no, I mean, if anything, it was, it's been a tale of two quarters. Q1, seasonally, low quarter for real estate sales to begin with, and then all of a sudden you get hit with COVID, and it literally shut down the market, for a couple months. But coming out of April, all of a sudden COVID became a tailwind for us, and people who were on the fence of selling their home or buying a new one, all of a sudden are in the market and looking for solutions that can integrate all the disparate services and do it as digitally as possible. And so all of a sudden COVID became this tailwind that accelerated a lot of our revenue that we had in the backlog, as well as generate a lot more, and to the extent that we've had back to back record sales months so far, in May, June, July, and August, and are really leveraging the fact that all people want to buy or sell their home as virtually as possible from the seat of their home. And so that's been good. Obviously we were able to also take advantage of the PPP loans initially, and so that really helped bridge a time in the company where liquidity was tight. And then we also came out of stealth mode and launched our public crowdfunding campaign in early June. And so, combination with that and the funds we got from the SBA, if anything, have accelerated a number of initiatives that we already had ongoing, and have generated have allowed us to generate very strong revenue these last few months.
Awesome, thank you. And before we dive into the next question, I just want to be mindful of time. Eduardo, can you remind us exactly how much time we have left, so I can tackle the number of questions I'd love to get insights on before we wind down here?
Yeah, so the official end time is 9:45, and I think after that we'll have maybe 1 or 2 minutes before Hoppin kicks us out, but we're aiming for 9:45.
Fantastic. So, I'd love some authentic answers from everybody here with regard to early stage investment. What do you think the North Texas area is doing really well, and what do you think there, at least what's one thing that our North Texas community needs to work on or improve together? Let's go ahead and do investors first. We'll do the founders second. Cindy, anything come to mind?
I think what North Texas has a lot of, and this is speaking from my perspective, which is all B2B. So apologies to those of you who are consumer facing, just not my world. So, but one thing that I think North Texas has is it could be this B2B kind of mecca, I guess. Like, so many corporations want to be here. I can't remember the exact number, but we have a ton, kind of a disproportionate number of, Fortune 1000 corporations here. And so my personal view is, in theory, if you are a enterprise software enterprise company, you're coming to Dallas or North Texas at some point to sell your product. So whether you're actually based here or not, you're going to be interacting with companies here. So I think that foundation, also just in general, physical infrastructure here is so good. So if I'm thinking about the mobility perspective or the real estate perspective, like, there are so many opportunities here. There are so many corporations here. I think that it's a great place to start a business. It's, tax friendly, all of those things that are great about Texas in general. So I think that's what we're doing really well. I think honestly, what we need is more investors. It's kind of a chicken and the egg situation, right? Like, to get the companies here, you need the capital, and to get the capital, you need the companies. And I think we have a great start to both. But it would be really great to get more. And Brian, I know you specifically mentioned early stage, but I also think we need it kind of across the spectrum. I think we have kind of the later stage growth opportunities, and we have some, even that kind of angel seed stage level. I think we need more of that Series A, Series B, because that will help companies who start here stay here, if that makes sense. And then that's going to just continue to build our ecosystem even more. And I know Mike and Laura touch on that Series A piece, but I think we could do so much more there. And that's a thing that we think about a lot at ProJane too, is that we're a family office, and then there's a lot of opportunity to tap into the family office capital that exists here in North Texas. So we have to be creative and think about ways to educate people on these types of opportunities. And I'll just make a plug for Venture Dallas as a way to kind of help do that. If you're a startup, please go register. We're doing a virtual kind of event this year to connect you with investors and spread the word to your investors as well, so that we can attract more people, both companies and investors here.
Awesome. Cindy, thanks. I think a lot of us will probably agree. You hit the nail on the head, and we're excited to also do whatever we can to create more activity. That activity leads to even more activity. Mike, I'm particularly interested in your answer because you bring the Austin lens. You're spending a ton of time in Dallas. We know that Austin is the center of the venture bonfire with regards to the dollars that are being put to work. What's one thing the North Texas area is doing well in your eyes, and what's one thing North Texas can really work on?
Yeah. So I've only been in Austin 2.5 years, and have spent a lot of that time visiting Dallas. So this is kind of a Texas-wide sentiment, but I've been really impressed, and maybe I shouldn't, just given the pride in Texas broadly, but there's a strong sense of community down here, both in Austin and in Dallas. I think it's growing in Dallas with groups like Capital Factory really expanding their presence and working with those early stage entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, venture capital is going to be there for the companies that hit certain metrics and look like they're going on a certain trajectory. But it's more about having entrepreneurs, mentors, and investors that are ready to roll up their sleeves and help each other because that's what they want to do, not because there's some sort of financial return. And when you have that and that kind of feeling that it's starting to come in place, I think you see venture ecosystems start to mature. And I feel a bit of that in Dallas. I think the one thing that's tough is that it's such a large metropolitan area that there's different segments and it's kind of fragmented based on industry focus or even stage to a degree. And so hopefully we'll see that start to come together and it becomes one large Dallas ecosystem versus different pockets. I also we didn't coordinate this ahead of time, but totally agree with Cindy that Dallas has the benefit of a lot of capital there, but most of it is in private hands in the ways of wealthy families or people that are managing wealthy family capital. And ProJane is one of the few that is very outwardly facing and taking a lot of meetings and very active in the venture scene. Many of the families, it's hard to get introductions. It's an even tighter network than the traditional venture network. And if there's ways to unlock that capital and make it available to these early stage companies, I think that would really benefit the ecosystem there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Laura, what comes to mind? What's one thing we're doing very, very well in North Texas? What do you think there's one thing we can do to improve?
Yeah, so sort of commenting on Mike's point. So I would say over the last 2 to 3 years, and I think kind of starting with Capital Factory coming here, I think we are seeing a lot more collaboration. I would say several years ago, there was not, it was still fragmented. It was much more fragmented than it is now. And so I think we've made a lot of progress, which is great and helps everybody and helps the companies. Again, Mike, there's certainly room to improve. And again, you've got, you might hear about a group in, Irving or UTA or some, there's always something that we don't know about. So I think there's room to improve on that. And I think echoing Mike and Cindy, I think certainly on the family office front, that's been difficult. And then kind of in terms of early stage, like truly early, some of the seed, pre-seed, I talk to a lot of people who always ask me where those investors are and ones that wouldn't be a fit with Capital Factory. And I think it's hard to know, at least I don't know where those investors are. And I think that's certainly a hard area because you've got truly early stage, really, really risky. And so I think if there's, if there are groups that I'm not aware of, please let me know. I think there's always room for that too. I think especially on the family office side, I think that's something that we've all had to deal with for a long time.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Laura. Let's get the founder's perspective. Dave, what's one thing we're doing really well in Dallas when it comes to you running and having founded and running an organization, a startup organization? What's one thing that you feel like you benefit greatly by being in Dallas? What's one thing you think we can improve on because it's difficult being in Dallas? Dave, are you there? Can you hear us?
Sorry.
That's for you, Dave.
Had some audio troubles. Yeah, look, I think, just to echo, so one of the big driving factors to me relocating from San Francisco, I agree with Mike. I think in a free market, capital will always find great ideas. Really what you want to do as an entrepreneur is position yourself where you're going to have the best access to talent and you don't have to compete as hard for it. I think Dallas is a great example of that. Obviously cost of living, that kind of thing. One thing that does hinder Dallas though is the access to early stage capital when it has, right? It's not like we're talking about a city that doesn't have that. We have so much private wealth here, but it's just tied up in late stage PE or other sorts of securities. And so I think one thing Austin does really well is celebrating the wins. And I think Dallas could do a lot better at that, but we've definitely started to do a better job of that. And I think thankfully for Capital Factory coming in and obviously early stage investors like yourself, Brian, who have been a part of the ecosystem, I think one of the strongest suits of Dallas is that it does have what's starting to get some entrepreneurs who have had some successes reinvesting back into the ecosystem. And that's going to be something that's a flywheel. And I think honestly, one of the key areas is like what I'm really passionate about is helping to bridge the gap between Austin and Dallas. I don't think it should be, they shouldn't be islands really. I think the momentum that Austin's built should help Dallas and Houston and San Antonio. And I think collectively that's a good thing because I know our investors in Austin are trying to unlock that early stage the capital here that could be part of their funds. So I think there needs to be more of that. But of course, the key thing is for entrepreneurs is to position yourself. I think it's really, there's a lot of, I know it's very cool to be in Austin. It's very cool to be in San Francisco, but it's also cool to be in Dallas. And I think that we are starting to build that factor for startups, where they have co-working spaces. They've got cool little pockets within the city that they can, that they can get cool coffee shops and places to grow their business. I think that's what is also a key thing that Dallas has started to improve on a lot, especially since I've been here in the last few years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you hit home on a really important topic. I've said for years, the corporations cast very large shadows on the startup scene here in North Texas, and that's because we tend to celebrate a corporate reload or very, very large exits. With that being said, I think that's starting to change as as organizations like Dallas Innovates really come out and build more market awareness and give great platforms to celebrate that to the whole community. Mauricio, how's it been? For you launching this business, how has it been in Dallas? What's one thing you think we're doing very, very well is very unique to Dallas? What do you think there's one area that the North Texas region can improve on?
Yeah, thanks. Having spent time in Silicon Valley, starting companies out there, you get used to, what made that ecosystem successful was kind of the link between kind of the university system, the Sand Hill Road, and then obviously all the successful founders and exits, and the PayPal Mafia and all the networks that come out of them there. I think Dallas, to the extent that we can recreate an ecosystem here, it's tying into the UT system on the educational front. Obviously, it's tying into the capital that's locked into different pockets here and educating that capital on, what's a safe note, what's a convertible note, getting them comfortable with, investing in early stage companies. and then having successful exits here, and then allowing the network of successful founders propagate through Texas and mentor other startups that are starting here. I would echo Dave's points in terms of the talent, the arbitrage, that opportunity, in terms of talent is massive. One of the reasons why I came back to Dallas 10 years ago was the fact that you could, especially now virtually, do a lot of the same things you can do in any part of the country, and do it in a city that's got the cost of living that we have here. It's been great to be able to attract people to this region because of that. And then finally, there's a lot of old school kind of companies and industries that grew up here in Dallas, whether it was oil and gas, whether it's financial services, subprime auto. So there's a lot of companies that now require some sort of digital transformation, and these companies are spawning off entrepreneurs that are attacking these industries, because technology is now allowing us to create solutions that make things better, faster, and cheaper. And so, I think a combination of all those things are starting to work here in Dallas, and I'm proud to be a part of this. I think organizations like Capital Factory, like Dallas Innovates, like what's going on here in Dallas Startup Week, I think just accelerate a lot of the trends that are already occurring kind of behind the scenes. So, I'm definitely happy and excited to be here and be part of this ecosystem and hopefully contribute to the growth of it.
Well, thanks. Our job is to keep y'all both here and make sure you've got all the resources you need to continue growing. Thanks, Mauricio. Being mindful, we've got about 5 minutes left. We'll try to do this since there's 5 of y'all, about perhaps 1 minute each. I'd love for each of you to make about a multi-year, let's call it a 5-year prediction about the startup and investment climate in North Texas and perhaps even in Texas. So starting with Cindy, is there something you have high conviction belief about, something you believe will be the case in 5 years from now relative to the North Texas ecosystem?
Sure. I think especially with COVID speeding up, a lot of corporations transition to, or if they haven't already, digital transformation, things like that. I think, and I saw this actually in the chat just now, so this is timely. I think we're going to see a lot more, whether it's investment or some sort of partnerships with corporations and startups. I think corporations are going to need startups for that innovation, and hopefully they'll realize rather than just swallowing them up early on, to work with them so that that innovation can happen within the startup itself, where it can happen quickly, and then those corporations and those startups can work together. And I think that's going to be I think it's already happening a ton, but I think it can happen even more here. And I think that's a great opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks. Mike, what comes to mind in 5 years from now? Give us a high conviction statement or belief that you think will be the case for North Texas or Texas largely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's probably not much of a contrarian view, but I think we're going to see a great period of company formation. And there's a couple of factors. Look, a lot of people are moving to Texas for lifestyle, tax, and other reasons. And so we're seeing an influx of talent in North Texas. A lot of it's at the corporate stage. But I think what you're going to see is as the startup ecosystem matures, folks that are living in the corporate world but have a desire to launch a business are going to feel like they've got that support network and the safety system in place to make the leap, to go launch their business, to leverage what they learned at a successful corporation and be the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I think it was Dave or maybe Mauricio who said, we're starting to see other entrepreneurs work with each other, mentor, cultivate relationships there. And once you have that flywheel, you start to see more and more new company formation. And that's what really drives the growth of the ecosystem.
Yeah, Mike, so you just brought up an interesting point, and I made a post maybe a week or so ago on LinkedIn that said that really starting a startup is really, or building a venture-backed startup is really like an apprenticeship. You really stand to have much more success having been a part of somebody else's startup before. Do you think that that's largely true for your investing activity, or the people that you're investing in? Do they have relevant experience, whether they've done it or they've been a part of other startups in the past?
Certainly we look for repeat entrepreneurs to the extent that they're pitching us new opportunities. But we also are big fans of founders who have solved or lived in an industry, lived in a domain, and have deep expertise, and now are setting out to solve a problem that they had to live with day in and day out. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a repeat entrepreneur. It doesn't have to be somebody who was in a scaling startup, but just having an acute sense for the pain point the customer's facing and how you want to go solve it is really kind of point number one.
Fantastic. Laura, a 5-year prediction about our startup and investment climate. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think echoing a lot of what Mike said, I think in terms of this being a very business-friendly state and easy for entrepreneurs to form their companies here. I think also, I would hope that talking about the investor side, I hope we would continue to see increased growth on that front so that entrepreneurs can get their capital from Texas and not have to go to the East and West Coast, and that there's going to be enough capital here that we can fund it ourselves.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we're all putting our best foot forward to make that a true statement for sure. Dave Cherry, what comes to your mind in regards to a 5-year prediction about the startup and investment climate? Dave, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I'm having real bad trouble. Cool. Yeah, my predictions. Well, I think number one, we're going to see companies see some exits in Dallas, which is going to be great. I think there's a season of sowing in the last couple of years, and those startups are going to mature. And like everybody's just said, I think the climate here is very conducive to building a business. So I don't see reasons why those companies would leave. And I do also see a lot of West Coast, East Coast capital looking for central investments because there's so much competition for deal flow. There's inflated valuations. I also think that hopefully we start to see a little bit with COVID, maybe that's just expedited the change in investor perspective. But we have a lot of that private wealth tied up in like commercial real estate and restaurant retail, that kind of thing. I think that though that capital may be reallocated as perhaps like the commercial real estate world contracts a little bit with all that's happened in COVID. So I think, my prediction is that we're going to have a kind of a new cohort of successful entrepreneurs that have exits that are now reinvesting, just like what we saw in Austin about 10 years ago, back into the early startup ecosystem.
Awesome. Mauricio, and what comes to your mind 5 years from now? Where do you think the North Texas startup and investment climate will be relative to where we're at today?
Yeah, I've got not much to add. I mean, I think the secular trends are here, whether it's, demographic or, economic. And so, I think to Mike, or Dave's point, the flywheel effect will come into effect as we start seeing some exits and the capital kind of recycled here, within Texas, as well as the talent that starts coming in, that's already started to come in.
Well, fantastic. Thank you all so much. We're right on time, Eduardo. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. So closing comments for anybody, as Cindy had mentioned, anybody that's out there that's seeking capital now or that's seeking capital within the next 12 months, build some investor relationships directly by, at Venture Dallas. Any startup can register, venturedallas.org. That being said, thank you all for participating. Eduardo, any closing comments?
That's it. Panelists, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you all here. Brian, Laura, Cindy, Mike, Dave, Mauricio, appreciate your time. If you need any additional information, please feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn. Don't forget, there's another panel at 10 a.m. Those of you who are joining us for the Venture Track, we'll see you shortly. Thank you so much, panelists. Have a good rest of your day.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.